Welcome back. We return to the matter of Australia's banning of the use of social media by the children under 16. Well, child protection specialist at UNICEF, Afrooz Kaviani Johnson, joins us now. Ms. Johnson, a very good evening. Thank you so much for joining us and a warm welcome to a late edition on SABC News.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, Australia is the first country in the world, as I've mentioned, to impose a full social media ban for all children under 16. From UNICEF's perspective, just how extraordinary is this moment, and does it perhaps represent progress or potential misstep in child protection policy?
Yeah, I think this is a very significant moment because it really reflects the growing concerns worldwide around children's experiences on social media. We know that social media is enabling various forms of harm, bullying, exploitation, exposure to harmful content, and all of these have significant impacts on children's mental health and well-being. But I think at the same time, it's important to recognise that social media is not only a source of harm. We also know it enables amazing connections between children. It enables their voice, their creativity. So I think what we're seeing is, families and communities kind of at their wits' end and trying to look for solutions to address the complexities. What we are saying is that age restrictions might be part of the solution, but alone they're not enough, and in fact they may even backfire.
And I see the legislation was presented as a decisive solution to the spiralling online harms. Does UNICEF perhaps believe the Australian government has presented enough evidence that a blanket ban is both necessary and proportionate?
I think that what we need to look at is that whole system of protecting children in the digital environment. So what we're saying is that a blanket ban in and of itself is not going to be sufficient, because we need to look at those underlying systems. We need to look at the tech platforms. We need to look at, what are those issues that are enabling harm, and make sure that through a ban, we aren't inadvertently, taking away the incentive for technology companies to invest in safer design. We know that even, with all the best intentions, children may still access platforms, right? So what we need to make sure is that these platforms are safe, that there are, baseline standards of protection, that all users are safe, whether kids, use workarounds, whether they're sharing devices, they are still going to access these platforms. And so we want to make sure that we continue to incentivize, and I think this is what all countries who are looking at regulatory interventions in this space, we need to continue to incentivize, that investment in safety by design, thinking about children's well-being and their safety in the design of all these products and services.
And in as much as UNICEF has warned that the age-related restrictions alone won't keep children safe, but why is a ban on its own an inadequate response to complex online risks like, as we've mentioned, grooming, bullying, mental health impacts and harmful content?
Yeah, I think you've nailed it on the head. These are complex issues. So, of course, as parents, as community members, as leaders in government, we want to have solutions to these issues. But what we're saying is that while simple solutions may seem appealing, and while they may be part of it, it really does need a more whole of society approach. So we need to be investing in digital literacy, support for parents and caregivers and educators, and for children, of course, themselves. We need to be asking children what their views are. How can we incentivize and make these spaces safer for them? How can we empower regulators and governments to really mandate child rights impact assessments so that companies are thinking about children's rights and well-being when they're designing and operating their services. So I think what we're saying is, look at this. It is a complex issue, but there are ways to address it, and we need to make sure that the attention doesn't just focus on things that seem appealing in their simplicity, but in and of themselves, they're not going to address, the underlying issues and complexities at stake.
And I suppose, Ms. Johnson, at this point, we certainly can never avoid social media, and I think it is also imprudent for us, to allow our children to stay away from social media? Because for so many vulnerable or marginalized children, I heard UNICEF saying social media is a lifeline. So what risks does Australia's law pose to the children whose only safe space, support network or educational resource lives online?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, the world is digital now, right? So we need to be empowering, supporting children, supporting parents and caregivers, mandating certain standards of technology companies so that we can operate in this safe environment. And as you say, and as we said in our media statement, it is a lifeline. Many children, particularly children who may live in, particularly remote areas, children who are in crisis situations, children who are living in conflict, these means can be the only ways in which they're accessing social connection. It can be the only way of accessing learning. It is the only way of finding, like-minded people. So there are really a lot of wonderful things that these spaces can enable. So what we want to see is regulatory interventions, societal interventions that, capitalize and really push for these positive impacts of social media. But of course, they also must protect against and mitigate against those various serious risks and harms that are being enabled.
And if the major causes of online harm lie in the platform design, the algorithms, the data collection, the targeted content, does banning under 16s simply shift the burden away from tech companies and onto children and families?
I think that that's a really important point, because we need to make sure that things like bans are not disincentivizing, the investment from platforms in making their platforms safer, in making them more child-centered, in thinking about well-being in their design. So really, we do have, a lot of important guidance and promising regulatory frameworks kind of emerging around the world. It is all new. But I think we shouldn't be overwhelmed by that. We should really rely on the best available evidence, consult children, consult young people, of course, consult families, and really, continue these investments in holistic regulatory and societal responses.
All right, Ms. Johnson, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, Afrooz Kaviani Johnson from the UNICEF sharing with us her valuable insights on the developments coming out of Australia about that country's bold move to ban all children under 16 from major social media platforms, which has sparked global debate, praised by many parents, questioned by tech companies, watched closely by governments considering similar steps. And while the policymakers argue that the measure is quite necessary to curb escalating online harms, UNICEF has reminded the world that age restrictions alone will not keep children safe.